Young and the Restless. Who is Diane Jenkins really, and does she deserve this torment? Young and the Restless. Who is Diane Jenkins, and does she deserve to be tortured? Welcome to USA 24, my channel Fantasy. Diane Jenkins is now in jail on Young and the Restless, but do you remember who she is and why all this retaliation is falling on her now? Is Diane really deserving of all this misery on the CBS soap opera? This is a transcript of our P&R video about the naughty girl who has stolen Jack Abbott's heart. Who is Diane Jenkins, and why does Phyllis Summers hate her? Hello CBS soap opera viewers. In light of what is currently going on in Genoa City with Diane Jenkins, we wanted to go over, in case you are a newer Y&R viewer, who is Diane Jenkins, why has she returned, and more importantly, why does Phyllis Summers despise her, and what has led to what we're seeing on the CBS soap opera right now? Let's get into it now. Let's start at the beginning with who played the role. She first appeared on the soap in 1982, and Alex Donnelly played her for many years. Susan Walters took over the role in 2001, and that's who we're seeing on Young and the Restless right now. But it was Maura West who played Eva Jerome on General Hospital, who played her during the time when she pulled off this scheme and faked her death. Maura West played Diane from 2010 to 2011, but when she left, she was supposed to be dead. And of course, she's no longer dead. So let's take a quick look at Diane Jenkins' tumultuous past. Did we mention messy? Yes. Thank you for subscribing to my channel. Diane's tangled history with Young and the Restless. When this woman returned from the dead, longtime CBS soap viewers were taken aback, because everyone assumed Diane Jenkins had died in 2011. Of course, we all know that in soap operas, death isn't always a permanent condition. In Diane's case, they did a major retcon. If you're unfamiliar with the term, a reedición is when they go back in time and rewrite history to make the current storyline plausible. So from the start, we get this whole story about how she staged her death, when it was intended to be a true and permanent death on Young and the Restless at the time. So Jack Abbott had been receiving these mysterious texts about his granddaughter and his son Chemo, and these messages drew him to San Francisco. Phyllis Summers tagged along for the ride, and he was expecting to see Taylor Jensen, her realtor. But when Jack and Phyllis arrive at their destination, their jaws drop because it is clearly Diane Jenkins, and they assume she was no longer alive. She was a beauty back in the day, and she was a rival for Jack's heart. She and Phyllis Summers were constant rivals who fought for Jack's love. After her first marriage failed, Diane Jenkins married Victor Newman and had a child. Diane Jenkins was present with Jack. She married, however, and moved to Europe with her husband, Andy Richards. They divorced, and she returned to town, where she married Victor Newman at one point, in case you didn't know about her Young and the Restless past. She also decided she wanted a child by Victor, and would have herself artificially inseminated. Victor possessed sperm and sperm storage, but Jack Abbott did as well. So Nikki Newman found out that Diane was planning to have Victor's child. Nikki, who wasn't with Victor at the time, was having none of it. So she switched the sperm samples. When the baby was born, Diane Jenkins assumed she had Victor's child, but she actually had Jack's child. Kyle Abbott is the character currently played by Michael Mealer. As a result, she took Kyle and left town for a while. But she eventually returned, and when she returned with Kyle, Jack and Phyllis were together, and they sued her for custody of the child. On Young and the Restless, Jack won, but he eventually returned Kyle to his mother. So there was some back and forth, and Nikki and Diane had a long history together. She and Phyllis felt the same way, and she wasn't particularly popular back then. Diane Jenkins' horrible death by bludgeoning on the Young and Restless. Diane was discovered dead in 2011. She had been bludgeoned in the head and died as a result of the wound. And Nikki Newman was arrested for murder at first, but it was later revealed that she was acting in self-defense. Her husband was the one who killed her. Her husband was Deacon Sharp, played by Sean Kanan, who is now on Bold. But the thing is, when they did the reedición, they redid everything. So what had happened at the time was that Nikki had killed Diane. She killed her by hitting her in the head. Then Deacon went behind her and did more damage, giving the impression that his was the fatal blow. And Miss Jenkins was already dead at the time. There was a body, there were morgue scenes, and Diane was dead on Young and the Restless. They had to redo it, of course. So instead of making Deacon her attacker, they inexplicably made Deacon her co-conspirator. That's strange because he adored Nikki. And if he had actually been conspiring with Diane, it would have caused problems for Nikki, which he would never do. But they did this reedición, and the audience has no choice. So the CBS writers say, oh well, they'll have to live with it. And we have to accept it because it is our new reality, despite the fact that it is terrible. For decades on The Young and the Restless, Phyllis despised Diane. Phyllis has been Diane's main rival on Young and the Restless for many years. Then Red and Jack married, and the other woman caused them problems. To be fair, when Jack was with Diane, jealous Phyllis definitely caused them problems. Diane adored Jack and was willing to go to any length to have him in her life. She once set fire to the Abbott guest house while she was living there, and she framed Phyllis in order to make herself look bad. Then, back in the day, Diane slept with Nick Newman. That would be strange, given the role's two actors, Susan Walters and the much younger Joshua Morrow. But he and Maura West were much younger back then. She was Diane at the time of her death. She had also made friends with Adam Newman back in the day. They'd plotted to cast Victor as the youngest Newman son in the Michael Money era. After this squabble on Young and the Restless, Diane apologized via text message to everyone she had wronged. That she died in the water, and that was the end of the story. Kyle had been living without his mother for many years, so coming to the door of that house in San Francisco and seeing it's not Taylor Jensen realtor but his ex, whom he assumed was dead, was a huge surprise for Jack. Of course, it's Phyllis' worst nightmare as well. Kyle was the catalyst for Y and R's return. In the meantime, since Diane Jenkins' return and Susan Walters' return to the role, her entire raison d'etre has been to have Kyle in her life. But she still loves Jack and wishes to be with him. But she was primarily concerned with repairing and rebuilding her relationship with Kyle. You should make up everything to your son, Jack said, and I'm just going to give you the chance, but I don't want you around me. He's warmed up and warmed up and warmed up since then, and of course, he loves her and has proposed to her yet again. That is the rage that is driving Phyllis on Young and the Restless right now. Now keep in mind that Jack had broken up with Phyllis months before Diane arrived in town. So it's because of Red's bad behavior that Jack isn't with Phyllis, not his new bride. You almost have to draw a line from this past, pre-death Diane, to the Diane of today. That's why Jack was drawn to her. He recognized her sincerity. He recognized that she was no longer the woman she once was, fell in love with her, and proposed to her. And Phyllis is having none of it. She can't believe this woman is back, that she's alive, that she's truly won Jack's heart, and that she has been given a chance. Diane Jenkins is given another chance, but does she deserve it? However, not everyone on Young and the Restless is giving Diane a second chance. Remember how Phyllis was plotting with Ashley and Nikki to get rid of the intruder. But for the most part, Diane is getting a second chance, and there aren't many clean hands in Geno City. Everyone there has had a second, third, or 10th chance, right? And many of them did far worse things than Diane, which does not excuse her actions in the past. But at this point, there isn't anyone in Geno City with clean hands. So for the time being, Diane is in jail, charged with Phyllis' murder. Phyllis is still alive. She believes that faking her death in the same way that Diane allegedly faking hers is karmic. And this week, Diane is arrested and hauled away by Chance Chancellor and the GCPD, proving that the ruse worked. Phyllis is working with Jeremy Stark, who did Ms. Jenkins dirty and ended up in jail for it. And they're both out for vengeance on the Young and the Restless. They want Diane to have nothing, no one, and no love, and they want to ruin her life. Because they both hold her responsible for what has happened in their lives. Instead, what happened to Phyllis and Jeremy was entirely their fault. Let us be clear on this. Even if you don't like Diane Jenkins, I think everyone can agree on that. Does Diane deserve her arrest and framed jaw on the Young and the Restless? Phyllis and Jeremy are currently preparing Diane. They staged it so that she purchased the bottle of strychnine. Cops also discovered incriminating paperwork at the Abbott mansion. That's what Phyllis left after sneaking into the house and being caught and thrown out by Diane. That day, she was planting something. It wasn't the poison that made her look guilty, but the paperwork. Diane has been arrested on Young and the Restless, and while Phyllis is overjoyed, her children are devastated. Red is supposed to leave town to begin his new life. In fact, she's turned herself into the worst aspects of her rival. She's become the woman she despised and done the same thing as her rival. As a result, it's pretty bad. And the thing is, Diane appears to have changed drastically. People suspected she was working with Stark, that she was after Jack's money, and that she was after this and this and this and that. Nothing was true. She has truly changed. So, while everyone deserves a second chance, she has earned hers. And what's happening to her right now is dreadful. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But inevitably, we in the writer's room here at Soap Dirt discussed how this could play out. And we have a feeling that Phyllis will be caught, and everything will come out, and it will all blow up in her face. And she could be the one who needs to do some time. We'll see what happens. Do you think Diane Jenkins deserves this now that you know who she is?